and gentlemen, welcome to the main event.
Let's go.
Round one. Fight.
Thank you for tuning in to the Crypto Street Podcast. Here are your hosts, Killer Whale, Prince, and Crypto Dale.
And remember to tip your waitress.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Crypto Dale back. I'm officially on a streak on the podcast again. This is 2 in a row. I've been getting chirped at a lot lately that I have been gone. But we're back, saddled up, ready to rock. Killer, it's good, homie.
Hola, amigo. Good to be here with you guys. Excited for this episode.
Are you Senior Lupe?
I am. I have a confession to make.
I figured.
Lupe is me.
That's kind of the hot.
Are you really? Because you know that you saying you are, even if you aren't, that's going to blow up crypto Twitter, right?
Yeah.
I wish I was. I wish I had thought of it, but no, I am not.
I mean, seriously, it is the greatest thing. I've told all my friends, none of my friends that are on crypto Twitter and don't really know me as Crypto Dale. I even said, like, hey, check out this Twitter account I found. And they're like, who is it? I'm like, just go read his tweets. They're hilarious. Prince, what's the weather like?
Weather, you know what? It's sunny, not many clouds. Can't complain, but it's probably going to rain end of the week. So, I'm just enjoying it while I can, man.
Yeah, okay. Funny story tonight. Okay, so a week ago, I had just crawled in bed and turned on the TV and watched the Sports Center, and like I catch out of the corner of my eye like this thing flying around our bedroom. So I was like to my wife, I'm like, God damn it, there's a fucking bat in our room. And I told Killer and Prince, you guys know about that story. So long story short, I got it, and I had like this pest control guy come today.
How do you get it? Like,
and so he's
bats in a house. I don't know. Maybe it's just where I'm from, but bats don't even like exist where I'm at.
So I like live close to a ravine and a building that's really tall that has a lot of like bats.
Yeah.
So it's common in the neighborhood for people to get bats in their house. So this pest control guy comes and he like checks the outside of your house and like is like, because bats will pee and they have an oily skin, so you can easily tell where they're getting in at. So he's like, oh yeah, there's a bunch of bat piss on your shingles, so I know they're getting in at this spot. So he's like, tell me what he's gonna do. So he's like, all right, let's go check your attic. So I'm like, okay, I'm pretty nervous at this time. It's like just nerve-wracking. So he goes up there and he comes down and he's just like, you want the good news or the bad news? And I'm just like, shit. Go with the bad news. And he's like, you've got 8 bats up there.
Oh,
and I'm
my
like,
God.
Like dead, right? And he's like, no, they're alive.
It's breeding
season.
Like,
oh my God. Oh my God. So I was like, so I said, so get him out, what are you going to do? And he's like, oh, no, this is just a consultation. And I'm like, consultation my ass. Get them things out of my attic right now.
Consultation.
And he's like, I don't have anything to do it with. So long story short, he's coming back tomorrow. So I'm going to not get any sleep tonight.
If we hear you suddenly disappear screaming or whatever, it's because there's probably a bat flying around in your office.
Yeah, and my wife is like deathly afraid of these things.
You know what that reminds me of? Some company had a commercial, like a series of commercials where it's like, we don't fix the problem, we just alert you to it. Or something.
It's pretty much our healthcare system, anyways, right? So
it's like the dentist. He's like, "Well, you got a cavity," and then he's taking his gloves off, and the guy's like, "Well, aren't you going to fix it?" No, I just tell you if you have a cavity or you don't.
Happy hour.
Yeah.
All right, sorry, I didn't mean to bore the listeners. I know a lot of people listening are going to want to tune in because we've got a slamming guest today with one of our. I think all 3 of us are big fans of the project. We've got Alex Wearn with us for Aurora. So, Alex, thanks for joining. Kudos to everything you guys are doing so far. I know Messiah is pretty big on this project, too. And I actually think he's the one that alerted us about this the last time he was on.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Thanks. Great to be on, guys.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for being on. I know you got a lot going on. So, let's just start out. We always kind of ask every guest the first time they're on, how did you get into crypto? What was it that caught your eye? Yada, yada, all that good fun stuff.
So I first heard about Bitcoin back in 2011. So I was economics in undergrad, and admittedly, the first time I heard about it, I dismissed it. Didn't think it would work, right? I struggled with the concept of where are you going to get value from a network that doesn't have someone behind it guaranteeing its value. And I admittedly overlooked the fact that the properties of the network are kind of what does give it value, right? The fact that it's doesn't require that central party to manage it or guarantee its redeemability. Can be sent anywhere in the world without any one individual's permission. So kind of looked at it again in 2013 with that run up, the famous run up at the end of that year, and kind of started jumping in more deeply, and then really got enamored when Ethereum started to come on the scene and the idea of smart contracts and programmatic assets, right? And that's when really a lot of the ideas started flowing within the communities of where this stuff could go. And that's where I started seeing really the opportunity to not only reinvent kind of the way the financial system works, but really anything that pertains to valuable data and information that we share today, that where we currently rely on some trusted intermediary to manage that data or broker a relationship, where there's an opportunity to revisit it. Certainly don't think the nut's been cracked yet. I think 10 years from now, I imagine the space and the business models will look very different than they do today, right? For now, our imaginations are constrained by what we've seen before. So a lot of people are taking business models that have worked and saying, okay, well, how can we put a blockchain or crypto asset into that business model? And I think the real ingenuity and the real creativity is yet to come.
Yeah, totally. I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head there. So let's dive right in. I know everyone listening is tuning in for a reason. So let's talk about the Aurora project. What you guys have going on. What you're trying to solve. The real life problems that
it's
you guys
a cool
are trying
project. It's one of these projects that I think a lot of people, they know what IDEX is now, because IDEX is it's almost cemented itself in a way with a lot of people who are trading that it is the go-to DEX. And for many reasons, it is the go-to DEX because it works very smoothly. But I don't think people are really aware of the rest of the Aurora DAO platform and what you guys have in store. I think maybe they're a little, they have IDEX, but they don't really know. So yeah, let's go into all of this because I think it's a fascinating project.
I mean, hopefully we're going to try and get as much as we can covered in our time here. So I know we've got a lot to get to kind of add on what Prince was saying. Awesome.
Well, yeah, let's start to unpack it. And I think it helps to start, like you said, most people are familiar with IDEX. I appreciate the kind words. It's really meaningful to have a project that's been so warmly received by those in the community. So just to start a little bit on IDEX, and I think part of what we think it makes us different. Well, I guess I know it makes us different. I think it's part of what's contributed to our success is our hybrid design. So the other decentralized exchanges, anyone can come along and be a taker and then submit that order to the network for processing. That's how it worked on EtherDelta. That's how it works on 0x relayers, where you actually sign the transaction and submit it to the network yourself. One of the challenges, though, is that you can have multiple users competing to sign and submit the same order on the order book. And then it's up to the blockchain to determine who was first, who was the one that actually gets that order and whose transaction fails. So you have this odd situation where the more the exchange grows and the more users start to adopt it, the worse the user experience becomes, because you have this race condition. You can have circumstances where people are paying higher gas prices in order to make sure that their order hits first. It makes it very difficult to do certain trading strategies if you don't know for sure that your order that you're trying to buy will actually be settled. So our innovation there was to still use a smart contract and private key security for custody of funds. But instead of having the taker submit the order directly to the network, the signed trade is passed over to the exchange, and the exchange is the one that submits it to the contract for processing. You can kind of think of it as a mini state channel. The idea being that you pass the message off chain. At that point, we can update the user's balances, mark the order as filled, because we have the signed transaction that we know the network, we've validated the transaction signatures, we've validated their balances in the contract, and we know that the transaction is going to mine and catch up with what we displayed to the users. So we think this provides the best of both worlds. It provides the speed and usability of a centralized exchange with the security and custody that comes from using a smart contract to custody funds and settle trades.
Yeah, that's been like the biggest part for me. Like I use IDEX a fair bit, actually, especially in the last 2 months. And I think that is the biggest thing for me that I've really appreciated is, having come from Ether Delta, which, is to me, a very basic model now when we kind of compare it in a lot of ways. It's slow, it's kind of clunky, and then, you go over to IDEX and it's smooth, things are quick, and it's been really cool. Yeah.
One thing that I like about the IDEX piece on the UI is that, sometimes when you log into the other, and I know it's a little different, but like say with Bitrix's new UI and everything, it's a little bit overwhelming maybe to see all that stuff. And I never felt overwhelmed at any point, as I've kind of like Prince and started using it in the last 2 months heavily. So it's been smooth and it's gone really
simplicity
well.
Simplicity is a kind of can be a complicated thing to do, right? And I think being able to take a complicated thing and put it into a simpler format for people, it's unbelievable. I love it. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, and I really think what you guys have done really well at this point is make a decentralized exchange that sort of feels like a quote-unquote regular exchange or a centralized exchange. And that's super important because just like you were saying, Prince, you log on to a lot of these decentralized exchanges and they're confusing, they're clunky, they're awkward. They don't feel like what we're used to, And, the first time I used IDEX, it was a little bit like that for me too, just because I was connecting my wallet to it, and I wasn't sure how to exactly do the transactions from that. But you get the hang of it way more quickly than a lot of these other services. And just the interface too. You have a chart, you have an order book, you have, the buy section, the sell section. It's just way more intuitive. And so kind of, I guess, Alex, walk us through the progression from partially decentralized, partially centralized to full decentralization of the exchange, which I know you guys are working on.
Yeah, perfect segue. That's exactly why I kind of set it up like this. So, thanks again for the kind words, guys. It really does mean a lot. And, just one comment on that. I think we still do have a ways to go on the UX. We're continually kind of, that's something we're jumping back into, is how can we refine that even further. And you mentioned the notion of it being weird that you're bringing and connecting your wallet. That's one of the things that I still don't think we've quite cracked perfectly, because if you think about any other website, the first thing you do is you go there, you look how to create an account, right? And then you log in with that account. And the notion of like this bring your own account, like your Ethereum wallet is your account for all of these applications, it's a new idea, and it's something that a lot of users aren't familiar with yet. So we get the question all the time of, how do I transfer from my Ether wallet to my IDEX wallet? And we have to say, well, no, you don't need to transfer at all. They're compatible. Take your MyEther wallet and just plug it in to IDEX, right? And so, that to me says there's still some things we could be doing better on the education front to make that even more clear.
When I first started using the platform, that was actually probably, because I think whenever you start, it's like, okay, you got to use this exchange if you want this token. Everybody kind of naturally is like, oh, I got to go sign up for a new exchange. It's like, I got to deal with this again.
Yeah, totally.
But it was kind of interesting because, I go on and I can use everything just with my ledger. And I never imagined, that I could really do that. And it's so simple. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, we think that's the key. I still don't think that hardware wallets have made great strides in the past, couple of years. I still don't think private key security and custody has really been cracked fully yet. People still talk about how nervous they get when they're making a transaction on their ledger, and certainly I don't think it'll be like that 10 years from now. So, but yeah, so we were talking about kind of the setting up the next phases of decentralization. So you're exactly right. So as I described it, really, you can kind of think of it as a two-part system. There's the smart contract and that custodies funds and settles trades, everything that the Ethereum network manages. And then there's the off-chain piece that we currently operate on our own servers that allow users to interact with that network, with the smart contract. We want to take the off-chain pieces and decentralize those so that we are no longer a centralized operator managing that process of interacting with the contract. So the idea is that end users will download a client and use that to connect to a network of nodes that are essentially running those functions that we run today. And you can break it down to essentially serving up the off-chain balances and order book, serving up trade history, and then coordinating that submission to the contract so that if you have a buy and then a sell of two trades that are involved with one another, that they're submitted to the network in the right order. Our plans for doing that involve our token, Aura. So this is going to be a proof of stake based consensus model in order to secure that network of nodes that will be running those kind of non like off main blockchain functions, right? So the idea is that those who are node operators will stake this token, lend their computing power to the operations of the network, and for doing so, they'll receive a portion of the trade fees that the exchange is collecting. And then a couple more points there that I think will be helpful for the listeners. So we're distributing that token Aura every month. A certain amount is distributed to those who trade on the platform, and we distribute it proportional to the amount of volume that we trade, that the user trades. The idea there is to reward those that are providing liquidity and value to the exchange now with the ability to be, more involved participants in the future version of the exchange. And really, we're trying to imagine, we kind of, if we extrapolate it out, we think that there's going to be a worldwide decentralized exchange that's, kind of not operated by any one central individual. So we're trying to think of how do you get to that point? How do you kind of use token economics to get a software platform like that developed, where there are node operators, traders, market makers, all these people kind of moving towards the same goal, kind of rowing in the same direction, if you will. And that's really kind of the goal of this token, to make sure that everyone's incentivized to move towards the same direction, right? Run a node, have it operate properly. Tell your friends about it, encourage others, bring liquidity if you're a market maker, all the things that make for a vibrant trading network.
Was that something you mentioned, liquidity, and that's something that's obviously super important for an exchange, and it's something that you can kind of manufacture to an extent. A lot of these exchanges are producing I'll say semi-fake volume or maybe fake volume.
Numbers that can't be relied on always.
Yeah. Was that a worry when you guys were first starting out and you first put this beast out into the wild? Like just thinking we got to get a certain number of people using this or else nobody's going to want to use it because there's no liquidity.
It's the classic two-sided market problem. How do you, how do you start something when there's no one else to do the business with, right? So anything like that. We kind of, I think a strategy that worked well for us. So we focused on particular projects early on. So when tokens were unlocking, we'd let them know, hey, you're listed on IDEX. Come check us out. It's a better alternative of other decentralized exchanges that are out there. And in that case, that was kind of the start Facebook at Harvard equivalent, where you had a community, some who had got the token via the initial sale, others who found out about the project later and were interested in buying it from someone else. And there was enough users within that single room that if you could get some to deposit and others to buy, that it got a bit of a market going. And then we kind of continued to do that and saw success, bringing some of those projects on. So that was kind of one of the ways that we approached really cracking that nut. Like you said, it's a classic chicken or the egg type problem.
And then kind of with this liquidity, the dealio, because liquidity is a tricky thing with any exchange, you guys are developing a protocol called Snow Globe, and that kind of tackles the liquidity area as well.
Yeah, so this is kind of further down our roadmap, but we want to eventually open up, similar to how 0x is kind of thinking about the problem, but we're really focused on keeping that high performance component of the trading experience. So, we think that a shared liquidity component is helpful and necessary for a network to grow. The idea being that there can be individuals that, have certain insights into a particular market or demographic, or maybe they have an on-ramp for certain customers in a certain geography. You can think of many reasons that they'd be better specialized at serving a certain segment of customers, but would then want to tap into a broader network of liquidity. But we think that from our perspective, we think that focusing on the single pool of liquidity and the high quality user experience, really that real-time trading experience, that's where we wanted to start, because we thought that was the best way to take steps towards this decentralized vision, right? If you try to jump too quickly, if the user experience suffers too much, then it can be hard to pull people over. So we kind of looked at really what's the 80-20 of using decentralization, in this case, a smart contract. And the real benefit comes from the fund custody, knowing that you're always in control of your private key, no one can authorize a trade on your behalf or withdrawal without you agreeing and consenting to it. So that was the part that we started with. And then we're trying, we call it kind of a pragmatic approach to decentralization. And then we're tackling the other pieces over time.
Talk a little bit. So your background is mainly in economics, right? In terms of what you studied at school and what you were kind of applying yourself towards. So how did that intersect with computer science in terms of all the coding and programming that's necessary to run one of these things? Was that something you had experience with as well, or did you really have to outsource and find people that were adept at doing that to kind of fit into this puzzle that makes the project work?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I studied economics in school. After undergrad, I actually went to work for a marketing analytics technology startup. So we were helping retailers with their pricing and promotional strategies. So think of your grocery store, 2 for $5 deal. We gave them a technology that helped them understand, what was that costing us, because they're kind of giving away, revenue in that situation. What was the additional sales it was generating? So really saw kind of the, interplay of, in that case, it was using technology to solve, kind of economic questions. In that case, kind of pricing elasticity and consumer response. Continued to move up through software development on the product side. So spent some time at Adobe as well as Amazon as a product manager. So that really kind of honed my kind of software development skills, and I always joke that if I were to go back and do it again, I probably would study computer science in undergrad. I think by the time I realized that I would have been a really good developer, I was already 4 or 5 years into my career. And I said, there's just the time it would take to get proficient, and at this point I'd be wanting to move into management anyway. So I was like, okay, well, I know enough about technology to know how to use it to solve cool problems. So really kind of focused on that product side. So when it came to working on, IDEX and interfacing with Ethereum, I'd say, know enough to understand all the technology, not to the point of writing code, but can read code and understand, when we're having issues, what exactly is going on. So I think that's almost necessary to lead and work in this space. It's really hard if you can't engage in those discussions or understand the implications of certain types of technology to make smart strategic decisions. But you asked specifically, when it came to building the product. So me and my co-founder, we found a third individual who was, pretty much wrote the original IDEX application all by himself. So he was, very impressive in how he was able to, kind of take our ideas that, we kind of hammered out the product behavior and how it would work. And then he kind of implemented it in code.
What one of the biggest challenges for almost any of these exchanges, or really any software blockchain software company, seems to be scaling. A lot of these projects seem to scale a lot faster than they thought they would, which leads to hiccups and headaches. And talk a little bit about how you guys have managed that, or maybe how you prepped for that when you were launching the system to begin with.
Yeah, so we had our own hiccups with scaling. We had a couple of days that we had to go offline because we just reached kind of a capacity of our current infrastructure. It was one of those things where it's a problem. We were working on the right path to get out of it. I would say it was kind of a 2-month effort to move out of it, and we were about 5 weeks in, and then we hit the limits. You didn't know where they were, but you knew they were out there. We hit it and had to compress about 3 weeks of development in 4 or 5 days, sort of thing. So, kudos to the dev team, the support team for, a lot of long hours there to pull us through that one. But, it's the interesting paradigm of, the whole thing that's hammered into your head for creating a startup, and it's particularly a technology one, is that a lot of the value is this notion of a lean startup, that you can prototype an idea, you can pretty simply get out a version that works and start to iterate, get feedback from customers, and understand, are you in the right direction or not? Certainly, we couldn't fully apply that here. Just, there's a couple of reasons, right? One, the security implications. You can't go with a, half-baked smart contract and expect that, you're going to have a successful exchange there. Also, just the interface between the servers and the Ethereum network was a challenging dynamic problem that, it took us a while to kind of crack some of the details there. But part of the good software design is that you don't build an overly complex or an overly robust system because you'll take too long and someone else is going to beat you to market. So I think that's it's interesting. This space, due to the amount of funds some projects have raised, I mean, they could be in R&D for 5 years and still survive. So I think that's going to be an interesting challenge for a lot of projects, because there's the joke that if you're not embarrassed by your beta version, then you waited too long to launch. But there's going to be plenty of people out there that, because of the funds they have, there's going to be the temptation to continue to refine it. So it'll be interesting as some of these projects start to come online, just to see what kind of strategy ends up winning, because it's very possible that you wait too long and someone else beats you to market with a version that is satisfactory, so to speak.
So I think something that a lot of people don't realize about IDEX or the Aurora project is that it's not just a decentralized exchange. It's this whole sort of financial bank and ecosystem. I even hesitate to say bank because it seems like a dirty word in crypto. Like, people don't like it for some reason, but it's really it's just something that
I like
functions to
ecosystem.
serve a
That's a
certain
good
role.
one.
It's necessary. Yeah. But so talk a little bit about maybe the reasons you guys decided to not just do a decentralized exchange, but really make it this whole ecosystem that's decentralized.
So we actually started, those who know our history, we started with an original project, Decentralized Capital. And it was essentially a tether on Ethereum. The idea was hold deposits in a bank account, issue a token that represents those deposits. We got some limited traction, some decent press. I think overall it was too early in the ecosystem for that need. And Tether was filling the centralized exchange arbitrage kind of role. But we never kind of let go of that idea of, how can you create a stablecoin asset that exists in the blockchain world. We realized that model we were pursuing is better suited towards, frankly, existing financial institutions. They've got the capital, they've got the understanding of the regulatory landscape, they're banks themselves. So we kind of looked at it from a technology perspective. How can we approach this stablecoin problem? And I think, there's a couple different buckets out there now. There's kind of the over collateralized crypto maker approach. There's the purely algorithmic approach, with things like Basis or Carbon. And then we're kind of thinking of, what other ideas can you use to kind of imbue a currency with value? And that's where we came up with the approach of using IDEX as a kind of a revenue generating entity to back and guarantee the value of a stablecoin. So the basic idea is that the Boreal, that's the name of the stablecoin, will always be redeemable on IDEX at its target value, starting at $1 USD, and then eventually we're going to explore, other target price measures, other targets of stability. The idea is that it's always redeemable at that value in lieu of trade fees. So if the price ever dips below target, then traders would be incentivized to purchase it on the open market in order to reduce their overall trading costs. So we eventually want to then, we want to introduce this idea slowly over time, because we think it's something new. People are going to be maybe uncomfortable with it at first. It's kind of unfamiliar. But we think that, as the exchange grows, so a couple ways to think about it. So as the exchange grows, so can the circulation of this stable coin. So you can imagine it's kind of like a retailer currency, where if you think that retailer, in this case, if you think IDEX is going to be around, if you see trade volumes growing, if you see customers coming to it, then you'd feel comfortable with this stable coin being in circulation. Eventually, we want to start taking this stable coin and start lending it to individuals on the blockchain using the kind of emerging set of identity and credit systems that are coming out. One measure could be trade volume on IDEX, right? If you are consistently profitable, if you're trading large amounts, maybe that's something that you could use as kind of a reputation. We strongly believe that these new credit and identity systems will eventually be just as valuable, if not more valuable, than kind of your current credit score. So we don't think there's any reason that you wouldn't be able to use that to kind of assess credit risk and use that as a measure of how much you might be able to lend to one of these individuals.
Being in the finance field myself, when I was reading the white paper earlier, I had to read it a couple times, and I think just the whole scope of it and what you guys are trying to do is really sets itself ahead of anything that I've seen so far on white papers and stuff like that. And having to look at credit reports all the time. Don't tell anyone that I'm a banker also, but that whole thing to me just kind of is on the forefront, and I think it's going to be really awesome, and I'm really going to watch how you guys develop it. And it's one thing for me that when Messiah first introduced this to us, it's kind of like seeing that I was just like, holy shit, like this could be awesome in my opinion. I think it's one of the things, and I'm not just saying this because you're here. It's one of the things to me that's the most exciting that I've seen in crypto so far on the whole Borealer. I'm really bad with pronunciation. I'm just a dumb farm kid from Iowa. So I mean, it's really awesome. And I'm really excited to watch it develop.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And, we think it's obvious that we're starting with IDEX. I think that's a real key to kind of bootstrapping this thing, right? So building liquidity on the exchange, getting people comfortable with this idea that you can have, you can imagine the exchange is fully decentralized. It's now generating a certain amount of revenue, which makes people feel comfortable with a certain amount of it being in circulation. Eventually, we can use it as a stable-based currency within IDEX. So right now, everything trades against Ether. It can be a stable-based currency pair. So now it starts to get more utility within the exchange. Again, kind of the volume starts to grow. And then eventually you can start imagining how people would start to accept it and understand it as a stable currency for everyday use.
So going forward, as you guys continue to build out the platform and work on it in general, what are the biggest challenges you see, or what are the next steps that you guys are looking to address? You don't have to give too much because I know you want to keep a competitive advantage over your peers, but maybe just walk us a little bit through that.
So I think one of the maybe I'll kind of answer that by talking about some of the previous challenges. Is one of the hardest things has just been operating on a blockchain network that's dynamic and constantly changing. I mean, I don't think we'll have any things on the level of the DAO in terms of existential crises to the Ethereum blockchain. But, for example, we first launched in October. And before CryptoKitties, we never thought about gas or transaction backlogs or anything like that, right? It was you could use one Gwei and everything was hunky-dory. And then CryptoKitties comes out and all of a sudden people are using 80, 100 in terms of the price. We were not prepared for that in terms of the way we were dispatching trades to the network and kind of monitoring how fast it was being processed. So that required a multi-week dev effort to try to improve upon kind of our existing tooling, bringing in insight from ETH gas station or Etherscan and kind of track, mempool and what transactions are out there and what gas prices are needed to keep things moving along. So, that's an example of how the network can change, the conditions in which you're operating can change, which is very different than, just operating on your own system where the whole goal is to control the environment and keep it as static as possible. So, certainly that's the case with Ethereum. We're continuing to look at other smart contract blockchains. We think that decentralized exchange should be on all blockchains. We've started with Ethereum because it's got the most assets and the smart contract system was most robust. But we're, investigating and looking at other smart contract networks. And then as atomic swaps or cross-chain atomic swaps start to emerge as a technology, we're going to eventually explore incorporating other blockchain assets as well. So I think that's a lot of the challenges and maybe just kind of thinking, on top of that, another piece is just trying to weed out what technology can be helpful and what technology can be a distraction. So, we're trying to figure out what other projects are out there that can help us achieve our vision, what other protocols, technologies. And, you can spend all day reading about new projects and what they're trying to do or what they claim to do. So I think that's another challenge as well is, we made a great call with, launching on the Ethereum network when we did. And we're trying to make sure that we, kind of continue to keep a pulse on what's being worked on so we continue to make smart strategic decisions.
So, I mean, I think in my mind, one of the things that would be, and I could be completely off on this, but I think one of the things that would help a project like yours in general is improvements in the Ethereum blockchain. For example, sharding, something that makes, transaction throughput way higher than it is now. Is that something you guys have thought about maybe helping develop? Or, I mean, I'm sure there are tons of people working on that already, but obviously it would be a huge boon to a service like yours, which handles a lot of volume.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So we haven't had many conversations with the foundation directly. We've had some interaction with folks at Consensus. That's something that I definitely think there's an opportunity for, more collaboration. I definitely think a lot of those challenges, well, let me rephrase. So I think the Ethereum network has done a really good job, at least the foundation has done a really good job at making sure that they don't fall prey to the like not invented here type idea. That if they see a good idea that someone implements, they're willing to say, actually, that's a really good approach. Let's kind of think more. Tell us more about that idea. I think like Plasma Cash, and Loom sidechains is a great example where some other developers came up with some innovations. Vitalik talks with them and says, okay, actually, this has some applications now. Let's think about how we can incorporate some of this stuff into the roadmap. Or incorporate some of these ideas. So I think that type of self-reflection and willingness to deviate from a previous plan is going to be crucial for them to stay kind of the top smart contract network as they are today. Because it's clear there's other networks that are EOS is a great example where they're basically saying we're going to make this trade-off of decentralization. We're going to bring in and just say instead of mining pools, there's 21 block producers. And because of that, we're going to get clear increases in performance. There's obviously a lot of discussion on whether or not that's the right decision, but it's now an alternative that developers and projects are going to be looking towards. So I think the competition is going to heat up. And I think so far I've been very pleased with the Ethereum Foundation's approach to kind of how they're taking a pragmatic approach to incorporating all ideas as they come out.
And it's hard too because even though there are competitors to Ethereum, like you mentioned EOS, they don't nearly have the ecosystem. I mean, part of what makes your project attractive is that there are all these ERC20 tokens that people can trade there, and all these other basically projects that you can support. And I think that's one of the things I like most about IDEX is, a company can finish its ICO, distribute their tokens, and the company might not have the funds to list somewhere centralized, one of the big exchanges that a lot of people are familiar with. But what they can always do is submit it to IDEX, assuming it's an ERC20. And I think that's one of the best purposes that the exchange serves is just, providing liquidity to people right off the bat. And, Prince and I have been trapped in Tezos for God knows how long at this point, unable to trade it. Granted, it's not an ERC20, but I mean, we would love to be able to go on IDEX and be like, list Tezos, please, free us. And so I think that's pretty cool. And you mentioned before how you work with the projects to, provide that from the get-go. So it's a nice symbiotic relationship.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we published a blog post recently. We actually don't charge listing fees, and we think that's an important component of what we are doing as a business. And like you said, it's really providing a place for all projects that. If you're a quality team and you're trying to build something, we think that you and your community should have access to it. So, that's really kind of what we're focused on creating here.
Maybe dive a little bit into how that process works, the submission process, because anybody can submit an ERC20 to get listed.
I'm curious because now, say somebody just, in their basement just says, hey, I want to make a token. I'm just going to do it right now. Are they going to be able to go and just get it listed right away? Or are there going to be, even though maybe they don't have to pay fees, which some other exchanges would have, how's the process to actually get them approved?
Yeah, so we do have a review process where we have an internal team that's taking a look at the project to make sure that and kind of vet them. And it's there's no hard and fast rules, but it's looking at various things such as have they built a community around it? What's kind of the quality of the team? Are they do they seem to be doing a project in earnest, or is it someone who's just created a new joke coin that they're looking to potentially just unload on some users, right? So we think part of that in the future we'd actually like to I mentioned kind of our vision to decentralize this. we'd like to also decentralize the governance of what's being listed. We don't want to be preventing people from trading things that they really want access to. On the flip side, we saw what happened with the open listing policy on Ether Delta, where you've now got people listing the new hot ICO before the tokens unlock, and they're claiming it's the new the new token that everybody wants to get, and it just creates a market that a lot of people are going to get burned. And so, we're kind of, it's a balance, right? And we may not have it 100% correct yet. So, that's something that we're always kind of engaging with the community and trying to get feedback, because we don't want to necessarily be the ones that are, telling people they can't do something that, that they want to. But at the same time, there's kind of a reputation that we're trying to uphold as a, quality exchange that has, good projects, and
it's a tricky balance,
the right token. So, we always appreciate that people generally understand it. Right. So, but it's just a bit of a side note. I think governance in these networks is something that really has only begun to be explored. The notion of governance based on hash power, which is kind of what a lot of the networks are today, I think that may seem outdated 10, 15 years from now. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I think it'll be interesting to see the evolution and how much it ends up trending towards, do we end up with representative democracies, just more transparent and open and accountable, right? It'll be kind of interesting to see how those things trend and how much it parallels what we've seen in, historical kind of politics and governance.
Cool. I think, Alex, we've kind of covered everything that we had written down. Do you have any final words or anything you want the viewers to know that we maybe didn't touch on?
No, you guys did a great job. I mean, thanks for all the great questions. It's obvious that you guys did your research and know quite a bit about the project. And thanks again for having me on and all the kind words about IDEX. Really appreciated it. It keeps us going. And, obviously we're continuing to work around the clock to improve it. So more good things to come in the future.
Yeah, you guys are doing an awesome job. I got to give a shout out to one of your community managers there in the Telegram chat for Aurora, Lars. There, he puts up with a lot of crap from people, but he's a good dude and he's trucking along. So give him a shout out.
That's awesome. I'll tell him to make sure he gets to the end of this interview so he hears the shout out. So.
He should be listening anyway, right?
Exactly. They usually do. Those guys are awesome. They're our front line of defense. So we continually hear even when if even for example during the downtime, it was the Telegram community manager doing a fantastic job. We really appreciate the support.
I was in there quite a bit during that, and I was watching Lars handle it all, and I was like, man, this is impressive because he's getting guys are firing at him like, hey, where is the exchange? I want to trade. And he's handling it really good. Like I was looking at it, I was like, I would be telling these people to get the hell out of here, shut up, leave me alone, but no,
would not be
that's why I'm not a community manager, right? But
Prince would be like, screw off, like it'll be ready when it's ready.
No, they take the flack so that we can focus on building. So couldn't do it without them. They're an amazing group.
Well, hey, like I told you, Alex, I'm pretty pumped for that decentralized capital and everything you're doing there. So, ladies and gentlemen, he's Alex Wearn with the Aurora Project,
DAO
whatever
ecosystem.
Check them out, auroradao.com. Yeah, we struggled with that. We didn't want to say the banking platform, etc. But Alex, again, thanks so much. Best of luck. Keep grinding. We're really pumped about everything you got going on. Everyone, check it out. But remember, this is not financial advice, yada, yada. So, till next time, thanks everyone for listening. Tip your waitress. Take care. Peace out.
Thanks, guys.